Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm Michelle, and today I'm going to take you through and show you how I use Core Knowledge Language Arts 3rd grade for my 7-year-old daughter. Now, she's been using Core Knowledge the last few years. This is our 4th year of homeschooling. We've incorporated Core Knowledge some way. The last 4 years, we've done the science units every single year. With my middle child, we've been doing the language arts. With my youngest child, he just started with the preschool units and will continue on. But I wanted to show you and walk you through how I use the Core Knowledge Language Arts units for 3rd grade. I think it's really helpful. I think Core Knowledge can be overwhelming when you first look at it, but I'm going to show you how I've kind of transitioned to doing everything digitally. Now, if you're unaware, Core Knowledge is completely free online. You can purchase physical copies if you want. I've done that in the past with science. I started off buying some physical student readers, and then I started printing some things for myself. Now I'm to the point where I have the student readers and the teacher guides on digital platforms, and then I just print the activity pages that go along with the unit. And I'm going to show you how I do that, so hopefully you have a better understanding of how easy it is to actually use and implement Core Knowledge in a homeschool setting. So I'm going to take you to my computer and walk you through how I use it. View of the units, and one thing I'm going to show you really quick that I think is helpful if you're new to navigating Core Knowledge is the Homeschool Work Plans website, which I'm going to show you right now. A site that is really helpful in learning how to figure out and use Core Knowledge. So I'm going to show you 3rd grade. So as you can see, it tells you 3rd grade math using MVP. You're going to go to 3rd grade language arts. You're going to click 3rd grade using Core Knowledge, and it's going to break up Core Knowledge for you. So Core Knowledge has 2 different areas: language arts skills and listening and learning. So as you can see, skills is reading, spelling, penmanship, grammar, composition. Listening and learning is literature, literary terms, vocabulary, those types of things. So when I use Core Knowledge Language Arts, at least for 3rd grade, I only use the listening and learning strands. And I actually find this really helpful because if you already have a phonics-based program, you don't really need the skills section. Does that mean it's not good? No, I've looked it over. I'm currently using with my preschooler. I think it does a lot of similar things to All About Reading and programs like that. So I think it's really a good program for phonics as well. But I already had something previously from my older child. That's the only reason I don't use the specific skills. I did last year with my middle child. She was doing some skills for penmanship and things like that, handwriting, but I don't actually use it for reading instruction for 3rd grade. So I just concentrate on the listening and learning, but there are 2 different components and they are split up separately on the Core Knowledge website, which actually is positive for you that if you want to only use a section, you can easily pull it out, opposed to if it was all together, it'd be harder to pull out specific sections you wanted. So you can see here, it'll take you through some how-to videos, which I found really helpful. And then you can download the support materials. So that takes you to 3rd grade. You just put in your email address and you can download the links. So there's a master checklist, which is just a basic, how to. If you're looking for a quick, easy, step-by-step, not complicated, how to use Core Knowledge, there you go. Right there, laid it out for you, even has the links. You can also they have a supply list. Again, there's nothing on hand I've had to go out and buy, really, for language arts. And then they have an organization guide, so specifically breaking it down for you. One thing that's really helpful is they do have a schedule on this. Core Knowledge does not provide you a schedule that if you're using every single component for a grade level, so if you're using Core Knowledge Science, Core Knowledge Language Arts, Core Knowledge History, this will give you a schedule for all of them, which is actually pretty cool. So you can see here, and it breaks it down for you. So if you're doing it as separate math, just X that out. But if you're doing listening and learning and skills together, right here, it will show you how it lines up. Same thing with history. If you're doing 3rd grade history, because all the levels are grade level, all the units in Core Knowledge are organized by grade. You can do the history, you can do the science, and it will break it down for you. If you want a lesson plan that has all of the Core Knowledge, or if you just want to combine skills and listening and learning, you can absolutely use this schedule. So I just wanted to show you this real quick because I do think it is helpful, especially navigating core knowledge if you're not accustomed to it. I don't use any of this because I've been using core knowledge for 4 years. I don't need any of these supplemental materials or help with it because I'm just aware of how the program works and I can schedule it pretty well myself at this point. So that website is helpful. So now I'm going to show you how to actually use the curriculum. So I'm going to go to this download free curriculum. It's going to take me to this page. And again, you just plug in your subject, your grade level, and it'll bring all the different units up. And like I said in the homeschool work plans video, they do divide the elementary units into listening and learning and skills sections. So I only use the listening and learnings, and that's just based on the fact that I use other things for phonics, reading instruction. That's not to say there's anything wrong with core knowledge. I just have other materials I've used already with my oldest child, so I'm familiar with. That's why I utilize it. But I will say we are doing the listening and learning strands, and we are doing writing as well in those units. So just that you're aware of that. But one thing I really do like is you're covering many different subject areas in this one language arts subject in core knowledge. So we're getting nonfiction, we're getting classification of animals, we're getting science, we're getting history, we're getting more science here. So you can see that although my 7-year-old does join us for group subjects, history and science, which, spoiler, is core knowledge as well, she's getting her own individualized science and history through her language arts at an appropriate grade level, which is really helpful. And I have found it especially helpful when we're doing core knowledge United States history, which is a 7th grade level. But she's got a really good background knowledge because, again, one of the core parts of core knowledge is building upon itself. It's introducing science and history in, preschool, kindergarten levels and building upon them every year. I've definitely seen that in my 7-year-old. And she's able to grasp higher level concepts in our group subjects because she has the contextual knowledge offered through these language arts units. So we're going to look at The Wind in the Willows first. So let's look at the teacher guide. So that takes us in here. So your read aloud anthology is your teacher guide. Your flip books are the images. The flip book is the images you're going to be using. So whether that's The Wind in the Willows, that's their story. It is a condensed version, it's not the original, but we did compare it to the original because I do own The Wind in the Willows. Image cards are just to reinforce your understanding. At this age, I don't use the image cards. With my preschooler, yes, I think it's more incorporated into the curriculum, but with my 7-year-old for this unit, I haven't had to really rely on those. So I don't really download it unless absolutely necessary. So the teacher guide gets downloaded on my Samsung tablet. The flipbook gets downloaded on my daughter's Amazon Fire tablet, so she will flip through it as I'm reading the teacher guide. Again, if you want to see this in action, I do have a day in the life where I kind of go through all of my core knowledge units with my kids. So let's go look at the teacher guide. So here's the teacher guide. Again, it can be really long, but keep in mind, a lot of this is information that is often used in public school setting. So you're looking at the beginnings, like all core knowledge units, going to have a lot of teacher information. It's going to have the alignments, where it fits in with standards, which is important in homeschooling. You should have standards in homeschooling. And the fact that, the first 20 pages of this is all that is not a negative thing. It's telling you where it fits in. So it's going to tell you the domain. So for 3rd grade, this is what we're covering. You can see we're covering many different subject areas in language arts alone. That's why I don't feel a need to have a separate science or history for my 7-year-old, even though she does do group subjects with us, with my oldest. She's getting it at her own level as well. It's going to give you an introduction to The Wind in the Willows. It's going to give you a sample schedule, and it's going to give you, kind of lay out what the different components of it are, why this is important. It's going to give you vocabulary, so you can see this is the vocabulary my 7-year-old is learning in these units. And I have to say, she was math tested last year and she scored very well in vocabulary, and I think a big chunk of that has to do with the fact we've used core knowledge multiple years now. And she's getting introduced to higher level vocabulary, and it's being introduced into the context of what she's reading, what I'm reading aloud to her, or what she's reading. So it's a very natural introduction to the vocabulary, which I really like. She does have writing opportunities within these core knowledge listening and learning units. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. Comprehension questions, of course. It tells you about the different components of it. Every single core knowledge unit I've used has a trade book list, additional books you can have on hand to further what you're reading about if you would like to. So you can see we're at page 29 and we're just getting now to the first lesson. So again, it's going to give you your objectives. It's going to get you the vocabulary you're going over. It's going to give you a snapshot of what this lesson's going to look like. And again, these minutes, don't hold them too tightly. You're a homeschooler, you don't have 29 kids in your class. It's going to go much quicker. As if you watch that day in the life, we don't spend, an hour on this. I think it's probably 30 minutes we spend on it. And we do part A and part B in the same day, which I'll show you in a minute here. So you're introducing the read aloud. You're introducing the book you're going to be talking about. Is it fantasy? That type of, introducing the genre and everything. You're going to make some predictions. So they're going to read the title. You're going to look at again, if you want to use those image cards, we would always just flip through some of the pages in the book. And I would give, her the opportunity to tell me, what do you think the book is going to be about? So we are finally into our first lesson. So you can see here, the Riverbank Part 1, you're going to show image 1A-1, which if you go to your flip book, is 1A-1. So this is what they're going to be looking at while you're reading the teacher guide. So it's going to script it. This is exactly what you're going to say. And one thing I really like in these core knowledge units is it has, you can see these little symbols, ones. Over here, it's giving you explanation of that. So for example, he had a brush and pail of whitewash. What is whitewash? It's defining that for you in case your student isn't aware of what that means, and especially since this has some British slang in it. So for example, you can see 2 here, the number 2 here, bother, oh blow, hang. Those are examples of British slang. So I do really appreciate that Core Knowledge incorporates in the teacher guide either questions or explanations or further information on the side for you as the teacher to introduce to your student. So you can see it will go through here. The vocabulary words are bolded, which again, I appreciate. So this is, again, a condensed version of the story, but you can see you're asking questions through here. Some of them are comprehension, but some of them are deeper level questions as well. And I've talked about this in the past, how it gives you opportunities to incorporate things like narration and dictation very organically, that they are starting to form their own thoughts and be able to answer questions and think about it. So as you're reading that, you're just flipping your book on this. And again, my kid just uses her tablet. So you're reading the story, you're showing the images, you're asking the questions as they're presented, clarifying any information in the book that they might not understand, or words or vocabulary. Then when you're done with that section of the story, you're going to have some comprehension questions. There are different types of questions here. So the predictions they made earlier, were they true? So what kind of fiction is The Wind in the Willows? And you can give them different groups, classic, fantasies. What are the elements found in fantasy? Personification. Again, personification is something we've covered in previous core knowledge units as well. So she knows what that means already. And then we talk about, the British slang. So this is retrieval practice. This is giving them a chance to comprehend what they read, but also be able to verbally tell you that, narration dictation is coming in play here. So there we have all those questions here, some deeper thinking questions as well. I don't want you to think these are just comprehension questions. Some of them are, yes, but they're also doing some examples here, the think, pair, share. What examples of personification did you hear in today's read aloud? She knows what personification is, so she can give me examples of that. She's thinking about what she read and then pulling specific examples from that. And sometimes I will have her flip back through the book if she's having a hard time, just to refresh her memory. And then again, we do the word work, so we do our vocabulary. Again, this is just me verbally introducing it to her, telling her the definition, and then it does give you some opportunity to practice it, whether they give you an example of the word in a sentence or a situation that they've used that word. So if it's meandered, what situation would they have used a word like that? Sometimes in the units it will give you like 7 or 8 examples and they have to give you a thumbs up or down if that word is being used correctly. So that is one section. We read the story, we go over the vocab, go over the questions, and then we'll do part B. So again, retelling the read aloud. Does this sound familiar? A lot of, narration and dictation is naturally happening in these core knowledge units. So what's fun is that we had sentence strips here. So she verbally retold the story to me, and I wrote it on little sentence strips. And then I gave the sentence strips to her, and she had to read them and reorganize the strips in order the story happened. Absolutely loved it. She thought that was really fun, worked on her reading skills as well. So again, this is giving you the opportunity to use some of those image cards, talking about specific animals. So we're being introduced to a mole, which a lot of kids might not be familiar with the characteristics of a mole at this age. So you can use that image card that you download in here, and you'll have a picture of a mole that you can discuss, and it gives you some further information there. So that's an example of a Wind in the Willows. Same thing for the next one. You're going to give it an overview. You're going to introduce this section. Then again, you're going to start your story, which again, 2A.1. It's all labeled very nicely for you. You have your questions on the side. This is what the story you're telling. Then let's get into, you will have your discussion questions, comprehension questions. You'll go over a specific word, and then you'll do part B. This one is going over sayings and phrases. So let bygones be bygones. What does that mean? They give you an example of a situation. They're retelling the story to you. So that is an example of a fiction. I want to show you an example of nonfiction, because we are currently on classification of animals. We just went over an example of how a story works. Let's look at how nonfiction works. So again, we have the same things. We have our teacher guide. We have our flip book image cards if you choose to use them. So let's look at the teacher guide. Again, it's going to be laid out very similar to what you just did. That's why I keep saying if you've done one unit, the rest are pretty easy. It's going to tell you what standards are being met. It's going to introduce you to this domain. It's going to give you an example week. How I do this, honestly, is just we do the next thing. So, like I said, we do 1A and 1B. Next day, we'll do 2A, 2B. These components, again, you've already read this in the other one. You know the components. Why classification is important. Information for you. It's going to give you a vocab list of everything you're going to cover. It's going to go over the writing opportunities. So do you see the repetitive nature of this? That if you understand one unit, you will understand most of the units. That's why I can use this open and go at this point. Trade book list, like I said before, it's going to give you some books you can add on to the unit. So here we are, page 27, classifying animals by characteristics. So you're on your first lesson of this unit. It's going to give you some objectives, language arts objectives. You're going to see the vocabulary right up front that you're going to naturally be covering in what you're reading. It's going to give you an overview of this lesson. So we are at 1A. Just like the other one, you're going to have a domain introduction. You're going to introduce your student to classification of animals, what we're going to be talking about. What does classification even mean? They're going to be getting a classification chart as well, which I will show you in a minute in the teacher resources that I didn't show you in the Wind in the Willows, but there's always teacher resources at the end where you'll get your printouts. So here we are. We have 1A1, just like here, 1A1. So they're introduced to Rattenberg, a funny little character that introduces the animals. Just like the other one, this is what you're reading. It's going to have some explanation on the side. And It will give you some prompting questions, like if you're talking about a specific animal, point to that animal. 3, what animals can you name? It's giving them opportunities to discuss. You're just not just reading something to them and they're sitting there. They're actively participating with you in these, whether it be fiction or nonfiction stories, which I absolutely love, especially with my daughter with ADHD. It keeps her engaged. She's not just sitting there listening to something. So we'll go on to, and we're introducing different animals. So salamander, squirrel. We're learning about taxonomists, classification. Again, I love how core knowledge doesn't shy away from introducing these concepts at, 3rd grade level. Kids can absolutely learn these things. We talked about a classification chart, and we're actually filling out our own right now as we're going through the units, and it's something I will show you in the teacher resources as well, but introducing kids to classification. So first thing you're going to learn is invertebrate, vertebrates. You're giving more pictures as you're going through. So you can see it's laid out very similar to the Wind and Willows. You're reading, you have your explanations or questions on the side to keep them engaged. And then you have comprehension questions. So who is the narrator? So we're talking about story elements in this as well as perspective. So different parts of language arts is being covered. So you're getting different questions in here, which is really good. Again, you can refer to images in that image download if you prefer. I would just have them flip through the book sometimes if it's looking at a specific animal. And then, why do you think scientists have made and will continue to make changes to the classification system? Again, you're not just asking comprehension reading questions. You're asking more critical thinking questions, getting them to think deeper. I have to say, my youngest, who was doing the preschool unit, when he first started, he wasn't accustomed to answering or really thinking very deeply about questions. He would often say, well, I don't know. But now he's gotten to the point where he's answering these questions and really thinking about it. So I really do like that core knowledge cultivates that thinking process in children as well. They're not just sitting here, getting drilled with information. They're thinking, which is really important. So just like the other unit, you'll see we have some vocabulary work, and this one, like I said before, it gives you an example. So it gives you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Or would this classify? A grocery store worker may classify the food in the grocery store. Is this something that would be classified? They give you examples. They tell you yes or no if that's an example. And then we would do 1B. So you can see this unit specifically is getting more into writing. So we're going to look at 1B-2. So if you go down, at the end of the teacher guide are resources. These are the things I choose to print, the only thing I choose to print at this point. Everything else is digital for me. So this is the classification chart I was talking about prior. This is something we are continually filling out as we go through the different animal groups. And then you saw this in my day in life, I'll link it above, that you can see she chose a animal that we were talking about in that specific unit, and then she wrote characteristics of that animal. And you can see later on, we're going to use that as scaffolding for writing. So she's getting ready to write her first, informal paragraph about an animal. But all these different units we're going through, these different groups of animals, she's writing certain characteristics of those animals. And I think that's one good retrieval practice too. It's getting ready for writing. So this is all in the back with teacher resources, and like all core knowledge units, it will have an opportunity for assessment as well. So you can see by the time we get to Unit 8, we're going over topic sentence, supporting detail 3, supporting detail 3, concluding sentence. It's preparing them to start writing, learning how to revise papers, giving them some room to write. And then at the end, you will also get domain assessments, which I love too. So it's going over what they've learned. And again, some people are, assessments, tests, I don't want to do that. I think it's a good skill to learn. I also think it's good retrieval practice for your kids, especially my kid with ADHD. She needs ample opportunities to be able to retrieve the information and show me that she's remembering what she's learning. And I think Core Knowledge does a really good job offering those retrieval. And it's written in such a way that it's very naturally within the story, whether it be fiction or nonfiction, that these this information is being introduced, so I think it's easier for their brains to hold on to it as well. But you can see they just continue on like that. You'll introduce the read aloud, you will go through your pictures and your questions, and everything's labeled here so you can't get confused about where you are. You'll go through that, you'll have your discussion questions, your diving deeper questions, you'll have your word work, and then you will have a specific activity. So for this one, it was acting it out, kind of like charades. So they would pick an animal and act it out, and the other person had to guess what that animal is. So kind of like guess who. It was fun. That was the activity. So it's not always, really formal, like a writing activity. It sometimes can also be more of those fun activities. So you can see, it's gone really well so far. I hope that helps kind of understand how the units work and how easy it is to actually navigate through them. So that is how I use Core Knowledge 3rd grade language arts in my homeschool. If you have any specific questions about anything I talked about, leave them in the comments below. If not, thank you for watching.